Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host as always, Daniel Levy, your co-host Shaq. We're going to be recapping UFC 236. Dustin the Diamond Poirier just defeated Max Holloway. He is now the interim UFC lightweight champion. And Israel Adesanya defeated Kelvin Gastelum to become the new UFC interim middleweight champion. Both epic fights, epic performances. Got my man Shaq with me here. We were both in attendance. Shaq, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. I'm still kind of recovering from that great card, even though it's Tuesday, but I'll definitely never forget it.
Yeah, and I mean, how incredible is it to see a guy like Dustin Poirier who, he didn't get his title shot by saying a couple of funny quotes, and, he didn't just beat whoever was hot at the time, a long time ago. Like, this is a guy that's paid his dues. His slogan is paid in full because he's been through all the ups and downs that any fighter should go through before they reach this kind of accomplishment. And talk about someone who's truly deserving to be called a UFC champion.
Yeah, Dustin had one of those Bisping type of past, man. He's been in the UFC since 2012 when he beat Josh Girsby. And it was a long road, lots of losses, a lot of embarrassing losses, like the Conor and Michael Johnson. And a lot of guys, man, they would have just succumbed to the notion that, they'll never touch the belt except Dustin Poirier, man. He put his head down. He took the fights necessary to get back to those belts, main events consecutively. Pettis, Gaethje, Alvarez, and now Max Holloway, all former champions. So it was definitely earned.
Yeah, no questions asked. And I mean, ever since he moved up to 55, look, at 45, he was already a perennial top 5 guy. Super exciting. All those fight of the nights, all those performances of the nights. But since he moved up to 55, his power is translating on a even different level. He's going out there knocking out guys that have never been knocked out before, wobbling guys that don't often get wobbled. And it seemed like in his initial run at 55, he was already about to get a title shot, but then he had that stumbling block with Michael Johnson. Now, with a lot of guys, you take a setback like that, you'll never be the same. And it seems like with Dustin Poirier, after he took that loss to Michael Johnson, not only did he come back, he took things to a whole nother level. It seems like we're seeing a brand new Poirier. I mean, hence why he's got that UFC belt around his waist.
110%. Like I said, not too many guys would have bounced back from L's like that, and that's not the only one, man. He had a few, and he's always come back from them. And like you said, at 155, his power, I feel like he might be the best power puncher in the division, especially out in space. I mean, I think he's got the third most knockdowns and knockouts in lightweight history, and that's only in 10 fights. I mean, that's not considering the career he had at 145 pounds. So he's definitely one of the biggest power threats in the lightweight history. And how about Max Holloway, man? To beat the number 4 pound-for-pound guy, a guy who, people were saying his best work is going to come at 155 pounds later on in his career, and to, pretty much go ahead and shut that down was pretty impressive.
There were so many things that were impressive about this fight. Once again, nothing's ever been handed to a guy like Dustin Poirier. He wasn't just, win a couple fights and you get a title shot. It's win a couple fights and win a couple fights against former champions, and now you get to fight a current champion on the pound-for-pound list, a guy in Max Holloway who, people are saying could very well be the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter on planet Earth. I mean, people were talking about they want to see Max Holloway versus Khabib, so for Dustin to go in there and beat a guy like that the way he did really sent a message. And what was interesting to me is in the pre-fight, people are talking about how Dustin's best chance is to win a KO. If this goes to scorecards, there's no chance he wins. And, KO or bust, this or that. Extremely disrespectful things they were saying about him. That he couldn't match the output of a guy like Max Holloway. Well, not only did he match the output, Shaq, it turns out that this fight between Holloway and Poirier had the most significant strikes landed by 2 parties in any UFC lightweight title fight.
Yeah, I mean, that was... if it did go the 5 rounds, personally, I thought that Dustin, going into the fight, I thought that Dustin was going to be able to catch him at some point. But, you could kind of see somewhere in that second, third round that most likely that Max is going to be here for the 5 rounds. And It's not only that, the volume is a lot of people forget. I mean, he threw a lot of punches in that Justin Gaethje fight. That was a tremendous amount of punches that he threw in that fight. Of course, it might not be able to necessarily meet the exact number that Max Holloway throws. Max is definitely a lot lighter, and that's his specialty, volume boxing. But he doesn't when your name's Dustin Poirier, you don't need that many punches, man. Sometimes you hit guys and they start stumbling all over the place. So I thought it was a great strategy, a great game plan. I'm glad some of these fans aren't judges. I see some people saying that they think Holloway won, but I mean, at worst case you could say 3-2. I think first two definitely Dustin. First round was arguably 10-8. I mean, how many times does a guy have to wobble in a round? Holloway fought well. I think he gained stock in that performance. I don't think he lost stock in that performance. I think he might have one or two couple tough fights at 145, but I think he's still a great champion. And now I'm just glad that Dustin Poirier finally gets that recognition as a great fighter after all these years.
Not just as a great fighter, as a UFC champion, because that's exactly what he is. And we got to talk about how the fight went down round by round, because when that first round started, man, and you see that Dustin Poirier violence, he has this killer instinct where when he hurts someone, he'll start teeing off on them in a way, and it's like with a lot of other people, you might be criticizing his technique. You might say stuff like, oh, Max throws straight down the middle and Dustin Poirier throws loopy shots, but man, those loopy shots are fucking accurate. They're so powerful. And he got his head off the center line for a good majority of the time, Shaq. It didn't seem like he was eating too many clean ones in there. So that first round goes on and wobbles him a bunch of times, arguably gets a 10-8. I actually thought he was en route to get a first round knockout, Shaq.
Yeah, for a second it seemed like that. I mean, generally when he starts letting his hands go against the fence like we've seen against Eddie and Justin, he generally gets a knockout, especially it was real early in the fight, man. So, I was thinking they were both fresh that, I definitely question Holloway's ability to take a Poirier shot going into the fight. So, was I surprised that it happened that early? I mean, a little bit, but, and that's just only because just the excitement level of the fight. But I did think he was going to get him out of there, man. I was surprised that a 45er could eat those shots.
Man, well, that 45er is not just any 45er. He's Hawaiian, and man, he's got a granite chin. It reminded me of like BJ Penn in his prime. The dude can just eat whatever you throw and come back with his own. But an even better version, man, because I mean Max Holloway, that volume that he accumulates, it's truly something else, man. So first round went to Poirier. Now the second round comes out, and people next to me were like, "Oh, Poirier's taking this round off." The first couple of minutes, it seemed like Max was starting to get back into the fight, but then once again, Dustin rocks him at the end of the round and goes ahead and seals off 2 rounds in the bag.
Yeah, pretty much just like you said. It looked like Holloway. After a round like that, of course, Poirier is going to be a little tired, and Holloway took advantage of that with his volume punching, and then. With about a minute and some change left, another wobble, and he didn't fully hit the canvas, but he definitely dropped down with his back on the fence, and then Dustin landed that right hook that wobbled him again towards the very end of the second round. So, yeah, man, two rounds. So
2-0, third round starts. Now here, you got to give the third round to Max Holloway. Max Holloway started putting on his volume. Now, a lot of the shots weren't landing clean. I got to give credit to the defense of Dustin Poirier. And, I said this on the pre-fight, and, obviously people now know that we did take those plus 185 odds on Dustin Poirier. You can tail us at bestfightpicks.com. But it seemed like in that third round when Max started to tee off, I remember people talking about how, oh, Dustin Poirier is chinny and this and that. And I always found it super disrespectful when people criticize this guy's chin because, like I mentioned on the pre-fight, the way he fights, automatically he's going to eat more shots than most fighters because, he's not a guy that's, going out here running away from his opponent. He goes toe-to-toe with every single person he fights. So right then and there, it's going to leave the openings for more shots to be landed by his opponent. And that being said, he was eating the volume of Max Holloway, the same volume that folded a guy like Anthony Pettis, the same volume that set a significant strike record on Ortega's face, the same volume that got him that legendary moment against Ricardo Lamas where he pointed down to the center of the octagon. Well, he did that to Dustin Poirier. And yes, Poirier was recovering.
Don't forget about that volume on Jose Aldo either.
I haven't forgotten that. I doubt Jose has either. But that same volume, it didn't even faze Dustin Poirier. Shaq, Dustin ate it like a champ, and when it was time to return some of his own, he did. And every time he landed, Max 100% felt it.
Yeah, I feel like we said going into the fight, Brian Ortega really doesn't have much to fall back on. He's more of a Hail Mary sub guy or a comeback type of guy. We know Jose Aldo gets tired after the first round historically. Still both great fighters, but, they definitely have evident flaws. Poirier doesn't really get tired, man. Cardio's not really a issue for him with those knockouts against Gaethje, his wars against, Joe Duffy in the past. This guy is a dog, man. It's so funny because on the Countdown show, I remember Jorge Masvidal saying that he was just like, man, DP's just a dog, man. And it showed out there, man. So I think in hindsight, it was just a very, very good matchup.
So we got a 2-1 heading into the fourth round. Now, this was the round that could have gone either way on a couple different people's scorecards because Max was starting to get off with that volume. He also ended the round with that Darce choke, but he also ate that huge knee by Dustin Poirier. So I got to know, man, how did you score that fourth round?
Yeah, man, the fourth round, it definitely looked like Holloway was continuing off his third round for a good 3 minutes or so. Although he was probably slightly ahead, the round was still within reach for Poirier to grab, and I think that knee did it. When the knee landed and you get a clear reaction from Holloway like that where he wipes the blood and next thing you know his face is covered in blood, the second after that you start slipping and ripping him a little bit, you start jabbing him a little bit and the blood accumulates. I think he stole that round. Of course him putting himself in that Darce choke at the end was a little risky, but it was only with like a second left, so damage versus what Holloway did earlier. I just think the knee was such a pivotal moment of that round. That was the biggest thing that happened in that round, the thing that made the crowd go ooh and ah. So, I have to give that round to Poirier. But, if a bad judge could score for Holloway, it was definitely within reach. But personally, I scored that round for Dustin, but definitely knew it was a close round.
Live, I thought that Dustin Poirier won that round. But when I went back and rewatched it, I see the case for Holloway taking it. But once again, man, I got to go back to that damage. When Poirier landed that knee, in my eyes, that was the most significant moment of that round. So that's why I scored it for Poirier live. If you want to be nice and give that to Max, okay, I understand. But I personally had it for Poirier. And then it comes back to that fifth round where, once again, Max starts to get off on a bit of his volume. But, man, what was interesting to me about that fifth and final round was that towards the end there, Dustin started to pin him up against the fence, started to kill a little clock, and then once they met in the center of the octagon, they started trading those final blows. Once again, Dustin landed the harder shots, which clearly affected Max Holloway, so I did give him the fight. I did score it for Dustin Poirier, and I know people are saying that 49-46 is a bit off. I respectfully disagree. Look, at worst, 48-47 Poirier, but I think the people that are scoring it for Holloway are extremely biased, and I love Max Holloway, one of my all-time favorite fighters, but I saw Dustin Poirier defeat Max Holloway, Shaq.
Yeah, 100%. I scored the fifth round. A lot of people where I was sitting were saying it was 2-2 or 3-1. After that fifth round was over, everyone agreed Poirier won that fifth round with that tie-up positioning on the fence. I thought he got the better of the boxing that round, moved forward a lot more. So I definitely thought he won the fight. Max fought well, like he says, it is what it is.
Yeah, and talk about a really classy guy in Max Holloway. The way he handled this defeat, I feel like a lot of fighters could really learn from a guy like Max Holloway. He didn't make it about himself. He didn't pull an Alan Juban where, me and you saw that fight. I know we had a...
By the way, what was he crying about again?
Alan Juban.
Yeah, what was he throwing a temper tantrum about again?
I mean, the guy landed 0 strikes and he's like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" It's like, Alan, are you fucking kidding me? You know what I mean? So much we'll get to that fight in a second, but much respect to Max Holloway for not going out there and pulling an Alan Juban when you lost the fight. Even if you think you won, he really let Dustin have his moment inside the octagon. Also when he got on the mic and also afterwards, man. Max Holloway is the definition of a class act. I can't wait to see him back at 45s. I still think that he runs through most of the division there. But this night simply belonged to Dustin Poirier. And now, once again, you talk about his quote, paid in full. It truly has been paid in full. Now he's the UFC interim lightweight champ. And this sets up the big shot versus Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough fight. We know what Khabib brings to the table, probably the greatest lightweight of all time. It's going to be a tough test, but I've always heard, people say like Holloway was supposed to fight Khabib. I feel like Holloway could be a good matchup for Khabib, or a Justin Gaethje I hear people are saying is a bad matchup for Khabib. In the past, I've heard them say, Eddie Alvarez was a bad matchup for Khabib, and now he gets to fight the guy that whooped all of them, so.
Definitely very intriguing to me. I think that Dustin Poirier hits a lot harder than Khabib, but it comes down to can he deal with what the other 27 men haven't been able to deal with, which is getting this guy off of you, because when Khabib's on top of someone, he's raining that ground and pound from the heavens, man. So that's an entirely new challenge for Dustin Poirier to get ready for. I mean, you go from fighting the #1 volume striker in the entire sport in Max Holloway to now you're fighting the #1 ground and pound guy in the entire sport. So Dustin Poirier, man, he's really going through a murderer's row. He's been through a murderer's row his entire career, but the last few fights, champion after champion after champion, now he gets to fight what many people consider to be the lightweight GOAT, Khabib Nurmagomedov. What kind of chances do you give the Diamond?
Look, man, anything can happen in there. Although Khabib has been very dominant for the most part, I mean, he mauls everyone. There has been moments where, guys have touched him before. It's not like he's 100% invincible. I mean, no one's invincible. He's definitely been touched. I mean, there was definitely exchanges in that Iaquinta fight, although it was a day notice, the Michael Johnson fight. But, like you said, when he gets on top of these guys, they generally wilt, man. So we'll see what happens. But if anyone has got the best puncher's chance, is Dustin Poirier.
What's so cool to me about seeing a guy like Dustin Poirier touch gold is that he's one of the most exciting fighters in the history of the sport. We already talked about how the guy paid his dues, and no one deserves it more than him for what the guy's been through. A Bisping-esque situation. But how about the fighting style, man? Because Dustin Poirier has always been a guy that's brought the violence. He's always been a guy that's must-see TV. So for someone like that to be wearing UFC gold, it's really awesome for me because, and I got mad respect for all the champions. But, for example, and no disrespect to T. Woodley, but I wasn't necessarily calling my friends to tell them about the next T. Woodley fight. You know what I mean, Shaq? Whereas over here with my boy Dustin Poirier, I'm calling every single person I know that the Diamond's fighting, right?
I mean, yeah, all of his fights are exciting. If anyone can name me, even somewhat of one boring fight, I'd like to know. But even when he lays on people, it's exciting, So the Joe Duffy fight, for example, so he's one of the most exciting fighters. He has been for a long time, in my opinion, and I'm finally glad that he got that recognition.
Now, Shaq, what was it like for you, someone who's been on the Poirier train since day one? What was it like for you seeing him touch gold right in front of your eyes?
Man, it was incredible. I had money on him. He was a big underdog. A lot of people were saying he had no chance. A lot of people were saying Holloway's a great fighter. He's a good fighter. So it was definitely satisfying. And now we move on. I just think it was just a good moment, man. He's been through a lot of, like I said, a lot of things that a lot of guys would have just succumbed under the pressure, man. I think the move up to 155 was great. He's definitely got a loss, to Michael Johnson, but he's never really been outclassed at 155, in my opinion. He definitely got caught by Michael Johnson, but so when he made that move to 155, man, I was a little worried when he made that move initially, but the guys that he's beaten, Carlos Diego Ferreira, who's still winning till this day, the first guy to really KO Bobby Green, Yancy Medeiros, he's a tough guy. He starched him in the first round. Joe Duffy, who at the time was the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, the list goes on, and then this current list of former champions, man. So it was good to see.
I've been to many UFC events, and this was probably right up there with Bisping winning the belt, man. It was truly a special moment to see the crowning achievement for Dustin Poirier, a guy that has really earned that belt around his waist, man. It was unbelievable. So can't wait to see him and Khabib run it. And for Max Holloway, once again, pure class. One of the best fighters on planet Earth. I still have him on the pound-for-pound list, no doubt about it. He's still the featherweight champ. And what I want to see next for Holloway is I want to see him, if Volkanovski beats Aldo, I want to see Holloway versus Volkanovski. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the de facto #1 contender fight right there. I don't see who else is in the picture. Hanato lost. I still think Zabit needs a couple fights with his habitual quitting in the third round. So, I think, like you said, if Volkanovski wins, that title shot should be his.
So, man, Kelvin Gastelum versus Israel Adesanya also went down in the ATL. And talk about an epic title fight. Talk about a dog fight, man. Because on our pre-fight, what we were saying the entire time was that, yeah, we think Israel's super talented, maybe even a future world champion, but we haven't seen him tested in a real back-and-forth fight. We haven't seen him in that dogfight against a top-5 guy. Well, Shaq, now we have seen him in that dogfight versus a top-5 guy, 2-2 going into that 5th round, and Israel goes out there and gets the 10-8 round in the 5th. So, hey, man, he answered the one question we wanted to know. He went out there and answered, Shaq.
Yeah, when the going got rough, he dug down deep, he bit on that mouthpiece, and he pulled out one of the greatest 5th-round performances of all time. I mean, the crowd was definitely my eardrums went out during that, man. Especially after the 4th round, even after Kelvin hurt him. And, the fight was just good, man. Kelvin came out, got off to that very good start by wobbling and dropping him. And then, it looked like Israel was going to run away with it in the 2nd and 3rd rounds just with that just his solid point fighting with his low kicks, and his Kelvin's leg was going all the way up in the air. And then Kelvin found a home for that head kick in the 4th, man. It was crazy. And Israel, man, he dug down deep. That's what we wanted to find out, if he could finally beat a real top 5 guy. And that's exactly what he did. So now we know a little bit more about him. We know that if the going gets tough, that he won't quit. You're not going to, take this guy's back and just get an easy tap out. I mean, he showed off his ground game. I mean, he's the real deal, man. And now he's got this fight with a fellow Aussie and Rob. So I can't wait for that. Both guys are talking mad shit too, so I can't wait for that.
Man, it's not even that it was just a tough fight for Israel. It was a real life and death type war where both men got dropped, both men wobbled, both guys ended up on their back at different points in the fight. And for Israel to overcome that kind of adversity in that moment where it counted most, I mean, that's some champ shit right there, man. That's exactly what I needed to see for proof that, hey, he's not just a future world champion. He's a champion right this second. So I'm so impressed with both guys. And as far as going round by round, the fight starts off and people were wondering, how's Kelvin going to close the distance on the 9-inch reach advantage of Israel Adesanya? And, man, he put the pressure on Israel Adesanya right off the bat. That 1st round and the 4th round were 2 of the best rounds of Kelvin Gastelum's MMA career. And the way he was walking him down, his hand combinations, it looked like Kelvin looked as fast as he's ever looked in that 1st and 4th, Shaq.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely his best 2 rounds, especially that 4th round. But I think Kelvin fought well, man. He had a good game plan. It's just that reach was definitely a lot for him to overcome. Offensively, he could definitely get off on some things. But we've always known Kelvin kind of relied on his chin to, he would sacrifice a little bit of defense just to rely on his chin a little bit. And this particular fight with the range that Israel had and the tools that he had, it backfired finally in that 5th round. And, sometimes the chin can only take so much. And, that I feel like that's what happened. But, it was up for it. It was there, man. It wasn't like he fought bad. I still think Kelvin can go on to realize another UFC title shot in a couple fights, man. I don't think he's far off. I kind of want to see him fight Yoel Romero now. I feel like he could still complete his mission for gold, man. It just matters on circumstances, injuries, pullouts. So Kelvin's got nothing to hang his head on. Israel, he's got that swag. He's got that flair. He's just got that, I don't want to say aura to him, but he's just very confident, man. And the fact that, going into that fifth round, a lot of guys would have been looking real wide-eyed. They would have been looking real lost or already knocked out. But the fact that, he got through that was very impressive, and he's a real champ.
When that fifth round came around, you could have already been like, I gave it my best shot, but he literally kicked into a whole new gear and discovered a piece of himself that he might have not even known he had, man. To dig that deep and get that win was truly something special. And what I was most impressed with, technically speaking, was Israel's hands, man, because I've always thought the dude had incredible kicks. I thought his distance was on point, but I always kind of had questions about his hands. He's a kickboxer. He's not a boxer. But, dude, some of those straight counters, man, with those straight punches down the middle that he floored Kelvin with, that was some beautiful shit that I haven't seen in his past fights, man. He wasn't able to do stuff like that to Brad Tavares, a guy that I thought he would have been able to knock out. So what it shows me is that Israel is evolving. Man, he's really discovering new parts of his game, and now his finished product is going to be something really scary, man. So I can't wait to see what happens with him and Robert Whittaker.
Yeah, Robert Whittaker, he's been on the sidelines for a while. He, due to some health issues, but let's see how he comes back. The way he's talking, it's got me really excited for this fight. Let's see who the king of New Zealand or Australia, whatever, which one it is. But Rob, we know that he has the ability to put anyone's lights out with a punch or a kick. We know the type of striking level that Israel brings. We know both guys like to drop their hands a little bit. So I definitely see someone getting knocked out in that fight.
So as far as the scorecards were concerned, 48-46 on all three cards. Did you agree with that score?
Yeah, 100%. First round for Kelvin, second and third for Israel, fourth for Kelvin, and 10-8 for Israel in the fifth round.
We're in agreement there. So now we know with Israel, it's Rob Whittaker next. So the question is, who does Kelvin fight, man? Because obviously he's going to have to take some time off, heal after such a war where he gave everything. And not only that, man, prior to that, he had that title shot taken away from him in the Rob Whittaker fight where he woke up on fight day and they told him, sorry, Rob had to pull out. So he already had a full championship level training camp for that, then the Israel fight. Kelvin's going to need a little break, but when he returns, are you looking at a guy like Paulo Costa? Do you want to see the Yoel Romero fight? Maybe even the winner of Jacare versus Hermanson? What's your opinion?
It just depends on what happens with some of these upcoming fights. First he's got to take a break. I'm assuming at least 6 months off. I feel like I said, he gained stock in that fight, so I don't think he needs another 5-6 fight win streak. I think he probably needs about 2 solid wins, and then I feel like he can get back in there. So I think, if Hermanson beats Jacare, that could possibly be a fight. But if Jacare wins, they've already fought before, so then I feel like you would have to go the Yoel direction. Yoel and him have never fought. Yoel's been, I can't tell you, when's the last time he fought?
The second time versus Rob.
Yeah, so I think we could see them. I don't think Borrachina deserves that fight yet. He's only, I feel like the Borrachina-Yoel fight's only compelling just because they got beef. So, I feel like Borrachina, they're going to have to test him at some point, so we'll see. But I like the Yoel matchup. Both guys are top 5. Whoever wins, they both want to get right back in there with Rob or Israel. So I feel like Yoel is the fight.
I'm never going to say no to a fight between Kelvin Gastelum and Yoel Romero. That will be absolute chaos. And I'm very curious where they would line a fight like that. And man, Khalil Roundtree Jr. defeated Eric Anders 30-26 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Now, a lot of people were very surprised by how Khalil looked in that fight, and obviously looked amazing. But if you go back and you listen to our preview show on Half the Battle, not only did Shaq pick Khalil Roundtree, but we put an emphasis on not only the improvements that Khalil's been making, but that there was a massive speed difference on the feet in this fight, and it really showed, Shaq.
Khalil has been one of those cases of a guy that I don't want to compare him to Cannonier, but I'll kind of compare him just in the fact that, they've both been kind of taking some L's. But, the guys that they were fighting, McCall and Johnny Walker and Cannonier's case Reyes and Blahovic, were definitely on a different level than the guys they were fighting. And the guys they were fighting had those inflated reputations for whatever reason. Eric, mainly just due to his football background, but I feel like going into this fight, it was clear, it was evident that Eric's just not this guy that people think he is. He's very slow, he's big, he's a tough guy. He stayed in there for all 3 rounds. But Khalil's been making improvements in his game, man. Even though he's been taking some L's, there has been improvements. He's been making improvements in his grappling. He just ran into Johnny Walker that night. I mean, Johnny Walker's got the attention of John Jones already. So that just shows you the level he's on. But it was a good win for Khalil. He's been training with the Hickman brothers in Thailand. I mean, look, if he keeps improving, Khalil might actually start to realize some of that potential that people thought he had when he first came onto the scene. So for Eric, I don't want to say I think it's over, but unless he gets a cupcake type of opponent, he's a very nice guy, but it's the fight game.
Yeah, he really is. We got to hang out with him a little bit. Eric's a super, super cool guy, man. I only wish that guy the best. I'd love to see him and Paul Craig run it one time, get Eric back on track there. But with Khalil Roundtree, we were already mentioning the improvements he made on that pre-fight show, how, against Tyson Pedro and Andrew Sanchez, it was the most embarrassing thing you'd ever seen when it hit the mat. But then against McCall, who, in my opinion, is one of the top prospects at 205, you saw Khalil get back up to his feet almost every time. So that right there, I was like, oh shit, he's been making improvements. Fought Johnny Walker, who I'm very high on Johnny Walker. I know some of y'all ain't sold on him, but I'm super sold on Johnny Walker. I know he's the real deal. I know he will be fighting for a UFC world title within the next 2 years. So I didn't see any shame in losing to a guy like that. But here against Eric Anders, he had the best performance of his career. The speed was just way too much for Eric, and Eric wasn't able to get anywhere near close to get this one to the mat. So this belonged to Khalil Roundtree Jr., and now it's time for a step up in competition, man. And what I'm thinking is, to me, I don't care if he fights the winner or the loser of this fight. I just want to see him in there with one of these guys. I want to see him in there with either Jimmy Manuwa or Alexander Rakic next. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good fight. That's a very good fight. I could see him knocking out Jimmy Rivera. Not Jimmy Rivera, but Jimmy Manuwa.
Oh man, he'd punt Jimmy Rivera into the 10th row.
Yeah, so I like that fight.
Yeah, man. And for Eric, I mean, what kind of layup do you want to see him get? I mean, are you thinking of Paul Craig, or is there someone even below that list that you'd like to see him?
Unfortunately, they only give Paul Craig prospects. So, I'm a personally guess that's not going to happen. But
Sam Alvey?
I guess something like that. I mean, Alvey, he is at 12.
By the way, Shaq, how bad would Eric Anders versus Sam Alvey be just in terms of a stylistic matchup? Because they'd stare at each other for 3 rounds, right?
Yeah, they both don't pull the trigger. And
who's going to throw a punch?
And they're both slow, so yeah.
Eric Anders versus Jean Valanche?
Yeah, I mean, like that's the route they need to go with Eric for sure. And it's sad. I mean, the guy went from fighting Maluko to getting that shot against Lyoto. And, I mean, I guess things just didn't pan out.
Yeah, so far they haven't, but I'm hoping that he can get back on track. Super, super cool guy, so I only wish the best for him. And props to Khalil, man. Biggest win of his career. Did it on the biggest platform of his career right before those 2 big title fights. And he really showed out, man. It looks like that work in Thailand's been paying dividends. But not only the work in Thailand, just looks like all the experiences that he's been through. He's finally starting to mature. He's finally starting to realize that potential. So I'm pretty excited for a guy like Khalil Roundtree, because I know you guys remember a couple years ago, especially me, I was super harsh on Khalil. You guys would expect a funny speech every single time he fought. But now, like I said, even on the preview show, I acknowledge the improvements that Khalil made before this fight, and now after the fight, it goes to show that we were right, and just even more so than that, who cares if we were right? It was props to Khalil, man. He went out there and did his thing, and it was cool to see someone, realize their potential after all the shit that they've been through, so I'm happy for him. Welterweight division. We both had that plus 115 on Dwight Grant to beat Juban. Now, allegedly, this was a controversial fight. Now, to me, it was more controversial because it wasn't the most exciting fight in the world, and, Juban had his reaction, but if you actually go back and watch that fight, and you guys might say I'm biased because I had a bet on Grant, but, I mean, I'll admit if I thought I lost, but I think Grant clearly won the first 2 rounds, and I don't think there was any controversy about that, Shaq.
Yeah, it was a close fight. I feel like Juban definitely won the third round. The first 2 rounds is what it came. Grant definitely won the first round, in my opinion. I thought he executed his typical game plan of sitting back and countering. Juban definitely tried to be a little bit more cautious than usual. He knows that chin definitely can't take the same shot that it once did. Not that that chin could take a shot, but he definitely played it a little more cautious. He definitely feinted a lot more before he entered the pocket. But when he did enter the pocket, he got touched. He blocked the shots, but it wasn't like he was necessarily doing anything offensively to really separate himself. So I scored that round for Grant just based on, the harder shots. The second round was very close. I felt like it was more of a standstill, man. It was just a close. No one was really ahead, so I'm not saying Grant went out there and had a great performance. I thought Grant actually fought complete opposite from what I wanted him to fight like. But the big notion on this fight going into the weekend was that if it goes to the scorecards, Juban's gonna win because Grant has this sit back counter style. But I kind of disagreed with that because I don't think Juban's really won a clear cut decision from start to finish before. The second round was close. Look, if I would have lost, I definitely wouldn't have complained. I would have just, sucked it up and moved on. But, they scored it for us. I thought we did enough to win the first 2 rounds. I knew it could have won either way, and it is what it is. But for Juban to be, throwing a little hissy fit and temper tantrum out there like he clearly won the fight, he needs to calm down.
Yeah, what was funny to me was that on the pre-fight show, I was giving people shit for making fun of Juban for being a male model, saying how Juban always fights like a man. Juban never goes for takedowns, and what was funny was that Juban went for a takedown in like the first minute of this fight. I was like, oh shit, so he actually does fear the power of Dwight Grant, because normally Juban doesn't give a fuck who you are. He'll put a line in the sand and stand toe-to-toe until one man falls, and that just wasn't the case against Dwight Grant. Maybe he did see that Zach Otto fight where Zach didn't engage whatsoever, and that made it a tough fight for Grant. So maybe Juban came in here with a different game plan, man, because he felt like if he would have actually attacked Grant, he would have got knocked out. Now, in that first round, when Juban did decide to commit to his strikes, he got countered hard, and I know we've talked about how Juban gets wobbled every fight and how he's a bit chinny. Props to him for eating those 2 shots that he ate in that first round, man, because you saw in the slow-mo, you saw that facial expression, you saw his eyes roll back, the fact that he didn't even do a little chicken dance or nothing, he just stayed there in the pocket. Hey, much respect to Juban for taking that. So Grant definitely got that first round. Now, how did we score that second round? I'll tell you how I scored it, man. Juban didn't do shit. Look, he walked forward the entire time, but he didn't land any shots. And in the beginning of that second round, Dwight Grant actually landed some very hard shots. He took the next 2 minutes off, but in those next 2 minutes he took off, it's not like Juban did anything to get those points back. So the most significant damage and strikes landed in the second round. 100%, no controversy in my eyes. And again, this isn't because I cashed a bet or this or that. I'll let you know if I lose. But I thought I clearly won those first 2 rounds. And then third round, we can give it to Juban because he got the takedown at the end. So I got it 29-28, Dwight Grant. That's what 2 judges had it. One had it 30-27, Juban, which, I let you guys know in advance that there might have been some wacky scorecards over here in Georgia, but the right man won, cashed that plus 115, and now we move on. So what I kind of want to see is both of these guys lost decisions, and I want to see Alan Juban versus Curtis Millender. What do you think about that, Shaq? You think Alan Juban would stand and bang with him, or you think he'd try to follow the game plan that's been showed many times to take this guy down?
I don't know. I feel like it probably won't be the fight that it once would have been, just because Allen can't take a punch anymore, and Curtis Curtis is about to take some time off. So I feel like they should go the route of, maybe a Juban versus... man, what I'd really like is for James Vick to move up to 170 pounds, come get this Juban fight, but, he's a little bit too stubborn. But how about Juban versus Carlo Pedersoli? You got Juban versus Max Griffin, Juban versus... what about the kid Nardiev? There's a lot of options you can go with Juban.
If Vic wants to move up to 70, that's a great first fight for him. If you want to get Nardiev a showcase, I understand that. But what about Dwight Grant, man? Because what I feel like if he's in there with guys that are running away from him, it's going to be boring. But if he's in there with guys that are actually going to fight him, it's really exciting. The question is, what kind of guy is going to go out there and try to trade with him? Right now, I kind of wish Paul Daly was in the UFC so we could see Dwight Grant versus Paul Daly. But who do you want to give Dwight Grant the kind of fight where it'll be exciting and a guy that's not going to, be too scared to strike with him?
It's a good question, man. I feel like if we weren't considering losses in UFC records, I would say a good fight for Grant, at least counter someone, would be, a Frank Camacho, even though he's 1-3 in the UFC. But, at least it's a guy that we know that is going to fight him. But another good fight for Dwight Grant I'd like to see is Alex Morano, man. Alex has been on a nice little win streak. He's won his last 2 fights. Yeah, he's 5-2 in the UFC. Grant's 2-1. I feel like Morano and him, I feel like they would have a good fight, man. So I like that fight, Morano versus Dwight Grant.
Yeah, I'm in for that fight, dude. I like Morano versus Dwight Grant as well. I was going to actually suggest Jordan Meehan, but I like stylistically, I like your suggestion better. So let's go with Grant versus Morano. Now, first fight of the main card, Nikita Krylov got his revenge over Ovince St. Preux via second round rear naked choke. I did cash that plus 130 on Nikita Krylov. I thought that fight should have been a pick'em, so definitely had to take those dog odds. But what was so cool to guys like us from here in Atlanta was that this is the second time in a row that Nikita Krylov lights up the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia with a second round finish. At UFC 201, knocked out Ed Herman with that head kick. UFC 236, taps out Ovince St. Preux. But what was really most impressive to me, Shaq, was the improvements that Nikita Krylov's made on the mat, because Ovince St. Preux, despite what his training partners said, because I talked to them after the fact, they were all like, what the fuck were you shooting for, man? Like, why were you trying to wrestle? You're not a wrestler, Ovince. I was like, man, that's where Nikita's weakness is. I actually thought Ovince came out with the right game plan trying to wrestle, but it was credit to Nikita Krylov for the improvements that he's made, because we always criticize his ground game, how, he's not making the improvements we want to see, he makes all these big mistakes, doesn't let go of the neck, and has no control of the body. That's why he got Von Fluid. But this time, whenever he got taken down, man, Nikita Krylov stayed composed, got back up to his feet, and really looked like he worked very, very hard for this rematch, Shaq. It paid off. Whatever he's been doing in the gym paid off that night, my man.
Yeah, generally he's had a trouble in the past of, when guys get on top of him, he completely, would shut down and either get tapped out or, pretty much get tapped out. So, OSP, going into the fight, we did say he's a deteriorating fighter. He fights with his hands down. I feel like Nikita in that second round hit him with a shot on the feet that pretty much started the process for OSP of running himself into the ground. OSP has just been constant worse after worse after worse, man. So, Nikita went out there. He finally didn't quit when he got taken down. And he made OSP quit when he got on top. He got another submission, and he keeps his spot in the top 15.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And for Krylov, it wasn't just in that second round. Man, right when the fight started, he starts coming after him with multiple shot combinations, throw 2 punches, then follow it up with a kick, and some very beautiful stuff right from that karate background. And again, when it hit the mat, which is the thing I was most worried about, he stayed composed. He didn't do anything dumb. Really played it by the book. Didn't hang on to the neck too long like he did the first time. I was like, my boy Krylov's been putting work. Then he got some takedowns of his own. Then he took the back, sunk in the choke. I picked Krylov. I bet him at plus 130. I was expecting a second round head kick knockout, but it was a second round rear naked choke. So that's just credit to Nikita Krylov's improvements. And what's interesting about him is that he actually has more submission wins on his record than knockouts. That's a little MMA trivia for you guys there. That was his 15th win via submission, and he keeps the no scorecards record alive. And what I mean by that is Nikita Krylov's had about 31 professional fights, and all 31 of them have ended inside the distance. He's got 10 wins by knockout, 15 wins by submission, and he's been stopped 6 times inside the distance as well. So Nikita Krylov, you can always count on him for an exciting fight that's not going the distance. And man, the kid's only 27 years old. He's just a kid, Shaq, and he's got that much experience. I really did think it was a mature performance, man. I really felt like, despite the fact that OSP is somewhat declining, isn't what he once was, I gotta acknowledge the improvements that Nikita Krylov has been making. And man, I'm really excited to see who he fights next. You know, there's definitely some options in that light heavyweight division. Someone that I was thinking for Nikita Krylov is a legend of the sport, someone that is often counted out, but every single time he fights, it's always exciting, and he still has knockout power to this day. I want to see this as a co-main event, maybe even a main event on a Fight Pass card, on a regional card. I want to see Nikita Krylov versus the great Shogun Rua. What do you think, Shaq?
Yeah, that'd be a great fight. Shogun, who is a legend of the sport, coming off that big win over who'd he beat again?
Tyson Pedro.
Oh yeah, Tyson Pedro. Yeah, when he was a big underdog in that fight. Yeah, so I like that fight. Or another good matchup that I like that might surprise you is, Nikita. I think he was number 15 going into that fight. Another light heavyweight prospect that might need some testing, or I feel like Nikita might be a good test for him, is how about Jimmy Crute?
Oh, shit. I did not expect that, but you know for a fact I'm very intrigued by the prospects of a Krylov versus Crute fight. I mean, that'll be chaos, and I guarantee you that his not going the distance streak will continue in a fight like that. So, Krylov versus Shogun or Krylov versus Crute, sign me up. And as far as Ovince is concerned, now we're at the point where let's just keep feeding him to our prospects. So what I'm thinking is if Michal Oleksiejczuk is able to successfully beat Antigulov, I want to see Michal Oleksiejczuk get the Ovince St. Preux fight. I mean, it's a step up the ladder. You beat Ovince, automatically gets you in those rankings. He's a guy that's been in there with John Jones before, so he's got that name. I want to see Michal Oleksiejczuk versus Ovince St. Preux.
I mean, yeah, that would be a good fight. Michal, I feel like that'd be an easy fight for Michal. Another fun fight would be how about giving Khalil Roundtree the OSP gift,
Man, I like that too, because once again, you have the questions about what happens if Khalil hits the mat, and Ovince is a guy that pressed the issue his last fight, trying to get Nikita down. Let's see if we can get a guy like Khalil Roundtree down. I'm in for that as well, Again, fighting Ovince always looks good on the resume, so if Khalil really has been making these improvements, let's see Khalil versus Ovince. I'm down for that as well. So we can keep it short on this fight. Frevola went out there and beat Jalen Turner. I mean, we both picked Frevola on the show. We knew that Turner, he's got the physical attributes, but he's nothing special, man. He's just, if he wasn't 6'3" with a 78-inch reach, he wouldn't be in the UFC. Just leave it at that, Shaq.
Yeah, he's definitely a lot. He definitely looks a lot scarier than what he really is. And Frevola, like I said, he's been making somewhat improvements in his game, at least, as where I feel like Turner really just got blessed with that fight against that math teacher. So good win for Steamroller Frevola. I like the kid.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to let Sean and Mick match him up, man, because the suggestions I have would get both these guys killed.
We can get some suggestions.
Because I know y'all don't want to see a Devontae King Cage in there with either of these guys, right?
They're trying to give King Cage top 15 guys,
and rightfully so. What do you want to see for Frevola and Turner, man? I mean, honestly, I want to see Turner fight some of my friends like Robert Hale and shit like that, because I think that's an easy win. But since that's not going to happen right now, who's someone else that we can get a nice win with a fight with Turner?
Man, it's a few good options, man. Frevola, he's a young. This fight, he wasn't too exciting just because I feel like it was more just due to the fact that this kid Turner's got a lot of reach on him. But, I feel like, how about Steamroller Frevola versus Alex White? That'll be a good fight.
That's true. I like that. And Alex actually scored a takedown his last fight, which shows he's been making improvements. So, okay, why not? Steamroller Frevola versus Alex White. And anything for Jalen Turner?
Oh, man, Jalen Turner. Jalen Turner needs a little bit of seasoning. Man, how about Jalen Turner versus Jesus Pinedo?
Just make sure it's first fight of the night, Sean and Mick. Yeah, I'm in. So Alexandre Pantoja walked through Wilson Hayes, and we both picked Pantoja, but I thought it was going to be a really close fight. I thought both guys were going to take each other's backs, and it's going to come down to that third round and scramble fest, and Pantoja put him away in under 3 minutes. It was the straight right. Finished it off with some ground and pound, and Alexandre Pantoja just entered the top 3 of the flyweight division, Shaq.
Yeah, the cannibal keeps getting better. He bounced back from that loss to Dustin Ortiz, and I mean, the type of beatings he's been putting on these guys is kind of scary, man. The Moreno beating was, pretty horrendous, and then followed up with a quick little win over Sasaki, and now to beat the number 5 guy, former title challenger Wilson Hayes, uh, was very impressive. Pantoja, man, he might be a win away from the title. I actually do have a good suggestion for his next fight. This guy called him out on Instagram after Pantoja got that win. So now I want to see Alexandre Pantoja versus Dice Dugueja. Let's see how Dice Dugueja, Davison Figueiredo bounces back after his first loss. He said he still wants to fight at flyweight, so we'll see how he does. But that's the fight I want to see.
Yeah, I like that fight, but I was just gonna ask: is my boy Davison able to make the flyweight limit anymore? He made it last time, but seems like it takes so much out of him. But as far as a pure matchup, I fucking love that fight, man. A Pantoja and Figueiredo, that's a hell of a fight. I'm in. Another one where there's a weight issue would be Alexandre Pantoja versus Ray Borg. Everyone's acting like Ray Borg should have won his last fight. I know we cashed a plus 260 on Kenny, but everyone's saying Ray Borg got robbed. Well, Ray Borg missed weight for a weight class above. If he gets his shit together and wants to return to flyweight, I'm down to see Alexandre Pantoja get a shot at the former #1 contender Ray Borg. So either way, it's a big fight for Alexandre Pantoja no matter what, Shaq. And for Wilson Hayes, if he's still looking to compete inside the UFC's octagon, there's always the Tim Elliott fight, which would be exciting. Ryan Benoit, we don't know what he's up to these days. Or maybe even Wilson Hayes versus Magomed Bibulatov. What do you think?
I don't feel like some of those guys should get blessed with the Wilson. How about letting my boy, Casey Kenny either get that, or how about letting Bontarine get that, or
Paiva, yeah,
Paiva get that. Let one of the guys that need to get it.
Yeah, I like that. Let one of my new prospects, my boy Jordan Espinoza, one of these guys at flyweight, because there are a bunch of new prospects, and I fucking love all these new kids: Espinoza, Paiva, Bontorin, Casey Kenny. So I agree with Shaq. I'm wrong on that one. Wilson Hayes should definitely fight one of those up-and-coming prospects. Now, Max Griffin fought Zalim Imadaev. It was a majority decision. Man, I picked Max by split decision on the show, but how'd you score the fight? I think we all scored the first round from Max. The real question: how'd you score the second and third?
Man, I actually thought this fight was really close. I definitely thought Imadaev fucked himself over when he lost that point. So he still would have lost the split anyways. But man, it was a good fight. I felt like Imadaev, we knew he wasn't, that Russian like a Khabib or a Sedner Magomedov or anything like that. But, I felt like it was a close fight. I felt like it could have went either way. But with that point deduction, I was definitely expecting Griffin to probably get his hand raised. But, Griffin probably did more damage. But it was definitely another one of those close, ugly fights. Imadaev, we knew he was a dirty Russian going in. He definitely tried his tactics, but Griffin, the vet prevailed. So congrats to him.
Yeah, Griffin did exactly what he had to do in that fight, grind it out as best he could. It seemed like the stand-up of Imadaev was more dangerous than we initially thought, and I think both guys will be back, especially Imadaev. For him, go back to the practice room, learn from your mistakes. I think he can come back a better version. But for Griffin, I think this is his finished product, man. So now it's about who do you match up a guy like Max Griffin with next. And, man, there's definitely some options. But another guy that's in a somewhat similar position to him, a little bit inconsistent but a little bit talented. You could do Max Griffin versus Peter Sabata. You could do Max Griffin versus Jordan Meehan. So what do you think's next for a guy like Max Griffin?
Yeah, Max Griffin, I feel like he's one of these guys that, he's going to hover around that one below 500 more than likely for the remainder of his career. But I still think he's a solid, exciting fighter. I feel like those matchups you said were pretty good. Who'd you say? Sabata, Jordan Meehan, maybe even you could put a Strickland in there against them. I feel like another fun fight would be him versus Jake Matthews, possibly. So, Max Griffin, I mean, look, I like watching the guy fight, so I'll definitely be tuning in. And he's a solid guy.
And for Zelim Imadaev, there's actually some fun fights you can make at 170 to get him his first win. You know, if Chad Lepre wants to stay at 170 pounds, I'm down to see Imadaev versus Chad Lepre. I know Shinsho Anzai is still with the company. I'm down for that one. Or maybe even, Bartos the Butcher. Have a nice little stylistic clash, striker versus grappler. What do you think's next for Imadaev?
Man, I want to see Imadaev in there against Keenan Song. I feel like that'd be a good matchup for him. And Imadaev, I see him winning. I see him winning a few fights in the UFC. So I feel like they could do that somewhere in China or somewhere.
Yeah, I like that as well. Shaq's got the best suggestions today. Imadaev, Keenan Song, because obviously Imadaev likes to go forward, throw big bombs, and Keenan Song likes to sit back and counter. So there's a chance one guy could get knocked out. And speaking of someone getting knocked out, Khalid Taha went out there and defeated Boston Salmon in the first round, in the first 25 seconds of the first round. And this is the one bet that I lost at UFC 236, thinking that, listen, Boston Salmon came in here with serious boxing credentials, boxed Errol Spence, and, if he would have been able to go all 15 minutes, who knows what would have happened, but he didn't. Khalid Taha came out there, threw his big bombs, and stopped him right away, Shaq. That was very impressive on Khalid's part.
Yeah, Khalid didn't give him a chance to fight. I mean, he closed the show before the fight could even develop, and props to him. That's how you come through it as an underdog. Salmon had a lot of hype coming in, and Taha came in with that 12-2 record. He didn't really seem that impressive going in, but one thing we know about him is he will swing, and that's exactly what he did, and he caught him, man. I mean, props to him. If those two main event fights didn't go the way they did, Taha would have had 50K for sure.
Yeah, and man, you know what I want to see next for Taha? I know this guy's coming off a loss, but they both have very similar styles, especially in that first round. I want to see Khalid Taha versus Guido Canetti. I feel like those two would stand and bang until one man falls, Shaq.
Yeah, that's a very good fight. Guido Canetti, he's very exciting. That's for damn sure. He definitely comes out guns blazing. Personally, I want to see Khalid Taha in there against Chris Gutierrez. I feel like both of them have similar records, both 1-1 in the UFC, both coming off dominating performances after a loss. So that's the direction I feel like they should go in. Both guys like to scrap. Taha's a big power puncher. Gutierrez likes to use a little bit more movement. So I feel like Gutierrez versus Taha is the fight.
And man, Bilal Muhammad went out there and dominated Curtis Millender. And what was interesting to me was that I thought if this fight stays standing that Bilal might be in big trouble. And it was actually Bilal that went out there and got the better of the stand-up exchanges, was able to mix in the takedowns as well. But the whole first round, he didn't shoot at all. And he got a 30-26 on one scorecard, Shaq.
Yeah, I definitely thought he lost that first round, but those next two rounds, man, he did what he had to do, solidify the takedown. We know Curtis's weakness. Curtis wasn't able to fix that weakness in a month. So Bilal did what he had to do. Put your head in between this guy's leg, get him to the mat. And, even on the feet, it definitely wasn't the big advantage that some thought it would be for Curtis. And that's just mainly due to the threat of the takedown. So, that was weighing on Curtis's mind very heavily. And I feel like it played a factor in the fight.
And Bilal's earned himself a step up in competition, or at least a big name, whether it's a fading legend, whether it's a shot at the top 20. Because the guy's been putting in work, and talk about getting right back up on the horse after his setback to Jeff Neal, goes out there with a very dominant victory over Curtis Millender. Once again, I got to put emphasis on how good his stand-up looked, because we all thought that, man, if he doesn't get this fight to the mat, he could be in big trouble. I mean, it was a pick-em for a reason. I cashed that minus 120 odds on Bilal, but, man, he rocked him with that left hook. He was landing some big shots. When he wanted to take him down in that second and third, he did that. And what I'm thinking next for a guy like Bilal Muhammad, you got to give this guy a step up. And I just saw that the guy I wanted to match him up with is already matched up. You know that Thiago Alves is fighting that Laureano Staropoli guy? Did you know that, Shaq?
Yeah.
So Thiago Alves ain't going to be it. But, man, what about Bilal Muhammad versus Anthony Rocco Martin?
I definitely could see that fight happening. Both guys are top 20, 25. So I definitely think that's a realistic option. Tony Martin, Sean Strickland, a Nico Price, so somewhere along those lines, those top 25, 30 guys, maybe even Morono for him too, or Claudio Silva, something like that.
Yeah, I like that Nico Price suggestion. Bilal Muhammad versus Nico Price. That sounds like a good ass fight to me. And for Curtis Millender, listen, tell me what you think about this, my man. If this guy is still on the roster, what about Curtis Millender versus Mickey Gall?
Mickey's gonna be at the UFC, bro.
But if they give him one more fight, I like that matchup because, striker versus grappler, we might get a close line on Curtis. I mean, what do you think? Who do you want for Curtis?
I think Curtis would kick his head off into the fifth row. I like, but for a different matchup, how about Curtis Millender versus, after with these two losses, maybe it's time we give him someone that, kind of stand up with him a little bit. I feel like they could do Curtis versus Luke Jumo. I see Brian Camozzi still on the roster. That's surprising. Or how about Curtis versus Randy Brown?
Interesting. Curtis versus Randy Brown. I never even thought of that. You think Randy's going to be shooting in that one?
Oh, yeah. Everyone's going to be shooting on Curtis now.
All right. I like that. But, man, I kind of personally hope they match him up with Mickey Gall because Mickey might think that he's got some advantage on the mat. I mean, I don't give a fuck what Mickey thinks, but if he's still on the roster, you know the deal here. But, man, speaking about a championship-level performance, I was blown away by Montel Jackson's win over Andre Sukumtath. Now, I know he was minus 500. He was expected to do that, but sometimes when you're that high of a favorite, guys go out there and play it safe, and they don't actually look like minus 500 favorites. Montel Jackson looked like a minus 1,000 favorite, Shaq. The only thing I got to know is how the hell was one scorecard 29-27? Which round did anyone score for Sukumtath? Can someone explain that to me, Shaq?
Man, I mean, it's kind of crazy. I'm going to guess the first round, but that's just because Sukumtath, I guess, landed a punch that round. But
he got slammed twice and he wins the first round. You know what I mean?
But, man, Montel, like we said going in, Montel, this is a guy that will be in that top 15 by the end of the year, probably before the end of the year. I mean, look, the guy's just a freak. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's a special athlete, man, bigger hands than Ngannou. And, I don't even feel like he should be fighting, now that he took care of a guy like Sukumtath, who's, a proven vet, a guy that's never been finished, no matter what, it's going to be somewhat of a tough fight. He went out there and made it look easy. So that lets me know that he's, a step ahead of guys on Sukumtath's level. So I feel like it's time to test Montel, even though he's less than 2 years into his pro career. It's time to test him with something a little bit more formidable, man. I feel like this guy is a future top 10, 5, maybe even a title challenger down the line. So, I feel like Montel deserves a very big fight. I think it's time to test him against that top 15. I got two opponents in mind for him. I think Alejandro Perez would be a good fight for Montel. Alejandro's number 12 or 13. He's 7-1 in his last few fights. That'd be a good fight for Montel to break into the top 15. Or Tomas Almeida. I mean, I can't tell you the last time that guy fought. He's still in the top 15. He already fought Ricky Simon, so doubt they're gonna do a rematch there. Or how about a Rob Font? It's time to put Montel in those rankings.
I like all those options for sure. I don't think that there's any need at this point to give him another cupcake or anything like that because the level he's on right now and the improvements he's been making fight by fight, it's truly scary. I mean, that UFC debut against Ricky Simon, not only was it short notice, but he had been pro for less than a year, barely a year, slightly over a year. I mean, he'd barely been a pro. He goes out there against, top 15 guy on planet Earth and had that kind of performance. Rebounds with the first round finish over Brian Kelleher and then puts that absolute clinic on Andre Sukumtath. And, man, that clinic he put on Sukumtath, man, wasn't just on the mat, wasn't just on the feet. It was an MMA clinic. He hurt him badly standing. The way he mixed those straight punches to the kicks, to the takedowns, and the speed of Montel Jackson in those combinations, especially in that second round. I've never seen him throw hands that fast. That's why they call him Montel Quick Jackson. It was truly a championship level performance. And I even looked at you and I said, this kid is a future world champion. I truly believe that. And I think he's actually ready for the top 10 right now, as crazy as that might sound. And there's a guy in that top 10 who I think is very respectable, who I think has an incredible record, who I think would actually challenge Montel Jackson and give him a real fight. And that's Cody Stamann. I want to see Cody Stamann versus Montel Jackson. I think that'd be a very competitive fight. But if they have other plans for Stamann, because I know who he's managed by, I know they carefully pick those fights, if they want to take it a different route, you know there's this guy named John Dodson that we're feeding to all our prospects these days, and I think that Montel Jackson, despite being pro for slightly over a year, and despite John Dodson having the resume he does, wins over TJ Dillashaw, Pedro Munoz, all these guys, I think Montel Jackson is ready for someone of the caliber of John Dodson right now. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, Dodson's probably going to get fed to these guys coming up. Him and Montel and Stamann got the same manager, so it's kind of it's going to be interesting to see if they actually do fight. But yeah, I like that Dodson fight. I feel like either Montel or Stamann could get that fight next. I definitely see a Dodson getting one of, a Simone, a Stamann, a Montel, something like that.
And the more I think about it, the more I really want Montel Jackson versus John Dodson. Just John Dodson would have such a hard time closing that distance on him. We'd get a nice line on it. And Montel might even be the first man in UFC history to finish John Dodson. So sign me up for that. That's the fight I want to see. Take away my Cody Stamann suggestion. I'm in for Montel Jackson versus John Dodson right now. So Poliana Botelho went out there and beat Lauren Mueller. It really comes down to how you score that second round. First round definitely went to Poliana. Third round definitely went to Lauren Mueller. All about how you scored the second. And, I personally thought she edged it out. Got the first 2 rounds. Respectable performance. And a good rebound for her after the disappointing loss against Calvillo.
Yeah, I mean, she did enough in that first round to get off to a good lead on the points. And then that second round, she pretty much kind of coasted, just, stalled her out on the fence. And it's a good strategy. It works. But, going into that fight, we knew that she's a Nova girl, man. What's the common issue that Nova now fighters have, man? They gas out in those late rounds. And that's exactly what happened. Mueller just got started a little bit too late just due to her greenness, the fact that she's only got 5 or 6 fights. But, Botelho got through it, and she's 3-1 in the UFC now.
Definitely. It's going to be interesting to see who they match her up with next. But, man, the first fight of the night between Brandon Davis and Randy Costa. Talk about starting things off with a bang, man, because Brandon Davis and Randy Costa, they threw down really hard. Both men wobbled. Both men got dropped. One guy got finished, and it was cool seeing the Atlanta-born Brandon Davis go out there and get his first UFC finish. And not only that, we saw him Friday night. He came into the gym, super cool guy. So to see him go out there, get that kind of response by the ATL faithful, go out there, get that finish. Not only that, man, you heard the pop from the crowd. Brandon Davis looked as relaxed as they get, man. He really showed his vet experience there against the then 4-0 Randy Costa.
We know Brandon is one of these guys that it might not be the prettiest, but one thing he's definitely coming to do is let's put on a show, man. He definitely fights. He's not one of these guys that likes to wrestle. Unfortunately, in a lot of his fights, he has been wrestled because he's fighting guys like Barzola, point fighters like Boshniak, man, that just hug his legs. And that's not the type of fights you want to put Davis in. Now, we know most likely he's not going to be, a top 15 guy or anything like that. But I feel like this guy could have a good career as just an entertaining fighter, man. If they put him in the right fights, he's got a good personality. So I feel like Brandon Davis with the right matchups can have a long UFC career.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I know he called out Sean O'Malley. Sean's actually got another fight booked that hasn't been announced yet. You know what it is though, Shaq. But so I guarantee you he's not getting that O'Malley fight right now. So what I'm thinking, man, and I know we suggested a different matchup for this guy earlier on the show, but now that I'm thinking about it, look, both these guys are coming off big finishes at UFC 236. Let's see Brandon Davis versus Khalid Taha. You know for a fact those two are going to stand and bang until one man falls.
Yeah, that'll be a good fight. I had something else in mind. How about Brandon Davis versus either Andre Ewell or Jonathan Martinez, man? Those guys, both of those guys are 35ers. Both of those guys aren't going to most likely take him down. I feel like Ewell and him will just stand in front of each other and see who the better man is. So I like I like the fight you said, but I also like these as well.
And for Randy Costa, talking about a kid that's only 4-0 at the time, making his UFC debut, I was very impressed, man. He came in there, he threw some super hard shots, and some of those shots that he hit Brandon with probably got his previous opponents out of there already, and you got to see what kind of heart this kid has, because oftentimes when you hit someone with your biggest shot and you're already used to them going down from the regionals, they don't go down in the UFC's octagon. Some of these kids could freak out, and that was not Randy Costa. He didn't freak out. He was simply beaten by the more experienced guy, but I thought he had a very good showing, and I feel like they should give him a little softball now. And there's this guy named Barrett Candaray who's on the roster who I would love to see Randy Costa get a win over. The only issue is Barrett Candaray is suspended for 2 years because he tested positive for some shit. So he's going to be out till 2020, but I would love to see Randy Costa get that win. But if that's not going to happen, there's this other guy named Wuliji Buren who's still on the roster, and I think that's a pretty good win for Randy Costa as well. But if they want to take it a step further, maybe give him a step up in competition because he did look impressive despite it being an L, there's another guy coming off an L on this card named Andre Sukumtut. So my options for Randy Costa are Barrett Candaray, Wuliji Buren, and Andre Sukumtut. What's your opinion on that, Shaq?
Yeah, Randy Costa seems like a good fighter with a lot of potential, a lot of power for 135. I think he just finally met a guy that ate his best punch, and that's pretty much all it came down to. Did he really belong in the UFC at 4-0? Probably not, but I actually found out that I feel like he probably does have the skill with a little bit more seasoning, a little bit more time, a little bit more, cupcake opponents going on. I feel like, Randy Costa should only be fighting, low-level newcomers, or, how about Ryan McDonald, the guy that fought Gutierrez? I feel like Costa and that guy could be a good fight. They're both fairly green, so Costa versus Ryan McDonald.
I would set Randy Costa the favorite in that fight. But man, UFC 236, such an epic card, especially the last two fights. Really cool to see Dustin Poirier realize UFC gold, and Max Holloway, such a stud. Israel Adesanya, Kelvin Gastelum with the fight of the year contender. Israel went through the dogfight. He passed it. Got that gold around his waist. Kelvin will be back. Just an unbelievable card start to finish, man, and truly blessed to have been able to witness it in person. They can follow you at MMA Genius 05. They can follow me at Best Fight Picks. You can get our bets at bestfightpicks.com, and I highly recommend you do, because this year I'm absolutely killing it. Up 14 units with a 55% ROI on the year. So, basically I'm back to my underdog roots, as you guys know. Bestfightpicks.com. Also, we got a cool section of the site called Stats and Facts, which basically really cool ass stats and facts for MMA betting that you guys need to check out. If you're not sure about certain things like who's got the most submission wins, KO wins, decision wins in UFC history, the entire list of undefeated fighters on the UFC roster, the performance bonus list, just a bunch of cool stuff made by my boy at Heartland UFC. Make sure you check that out and let us know if you have any cool suggestions of some more stats and facts you want to see at bestfightpicks.com. Subscribe to Half the Battle on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, and Spotify. We sincerely appreciate all the support you guys have shown us, and it was really cool to meet some of you at UFC 236. Shaq and I will be back later this week to break down UFC St. Petersburg in a few days. And until the next time, let's cash these bets.